All right, welcome back. We continue right here with the Island Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Bob Pompeani, Paul Zeise. A reminder to you, a big home game coming up Saturday for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, who won their opener last week, impressively. They're going to be one of the top teams in the USL this year, and they got one of the better teams that they're going to play this season in town at Highmark Stadium. 7 p.m. Check it out. St. Louis comes to town. We're also talking about the Penguins and where they're going to go from here. Another interesting comment today was Chris Letang, who got very defensive about questions concerning his ability to risk too much. So, Paul, it's interesting to see it because I think that has been one of the things. Chris Letang is a tremendous skater, and he, being that, can create some highlight reel moments. He can do a lot of things that other guys can't. However, there are times when he tries to force it when he shouldn't, and it gets costly in series. We saw it actually last year in the Washington series. Yeah. Can't remember the game, but there was a game where it was like that, and you know, it happens in this, and it gets magnified when you don't score a lot of goals.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is, you know, he's got to understand he's no longer the player he was even like 4 or 5 years ago. It doesn't mean he's not still a great player, but some of the things he used to be able to do, he can't do. And I think that if you watch what he does and how he plays, those mistakes he makes, those times when he tries to do things that aren't there and, you know, and ends up costing, you know, a goal the other way, those things he's got to eliminate. He's a veteran guy who's helped them win, you know, 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, the bottom line is he's got to understand that, you know, these are things he cannot do. And the fact that he got real defensive today when someone asked him about it speaks volumes to me about, you know, maybe part of the problem with his team is they all live in denial.
Jim, Castle Shannon, you're first up tonight. Hey, Jim, how are you?
Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hi,
Good.
Paul.
How are we doing?
Okay, hey, question I got to ask you about the Penguins. Number one, they should never got rid of Bruce Orpik. Number 2 is Murray is not playing good in the last 2 years. He gives up late goals. And number 3 is they should never got rid of Fleury.
No, they had to get rid of Fleury. Now, listen, I will tell you this. Marc-Andre Fleury has been the better goaltender since that trade. To me, there's no question about that. But they had a situation in their hands where there was a ton of money being committed to 2 guys. And now you have a 24-year-old goalie versus Marc-Andre Fleury, who I believe is 35. So, Paul, to me, you can't go back on that trade. I know a lot of people wanted to keep Marc-Andre Fleury, but we took calls here many, many years where people were getting on Fleury, wanted him out of town. It's the nature of being a goaltender. You're not going to have always your best year, but they had to make that move. Fleury has been better than Murray the last 2 years.
There have been some people, though. I will point out your former colleague, John Steigerwald, was adamant that they should have gotten rid of Murray. This was before it all happened.
He was.
So there were some people there, but you're right.
How would that have looked if you had a guy like that?
You're not going to give
2 cups at age 22.
No, you're not going to give up a guy that's 10 years younger. That's all there is to it. I get that. The bottom line is Fleury has been better. Murray has to be a little bit better than he's been, or at least a little more consistent than he's been. But to me, on the long list of things that are wrong with this team, Murray is way down.
He had a wonderful March. He kept them in it, I think, with injuries to Malkin and Letang. I think people want to selectively forget some of the good stuff he's done. He's only 24. They had to make that move, and I love Marc-Andre Fleury, and I hope he wins a cup this year. Let's go to Fred in Johnstown. Fred, welcome to the Sports Call. Go ahead.
Bob, many points to make about the Penguins.
You only get a few, though. We have a lot of callers. Make them quick, please, Fred.
Yeah, no matter what you say, Murray's not going to win games when you only score 1 goal over the past 3.
Absolutely.
And I don't understand why they would refuse to put Hornquist on Crosby's line during the playoffs when that's what he gets paid for. You sign the guy to that deal. That's where he has to be.
I agree, Fred, on that one, because I think at that point, after they rotated McCann and Simone, at some point you pay Patrick Hornquist $5.3 million. That to me says I'm a top 6 player. And when he doesn't play on the top 6, especially he's had good moments on that line. You know, that's one of the big mysteries, Paul. I mean, a lot of people wonder if Sidney Crosby just doesn't fit well with him, doesn't want that matchup. Nothing against Hornquist, but he does play straight-ahead hockey, which I thought in that series against the Islanders is something they needed to do more of.
But here's the thing. If he's not going to be on that line,
that's not 5-3.
You paid him a whole lot of money for him to be, a third liner, or what do you mean, a second liner or a third liner? I mean, to me,
he's got to be top 6 if that kind of salary.
Exactly, that's a lot of money to give to him. So it goes back to what I was talking about. The contract looked good, but the way that he's played and the way that they've used him, you're kind of like, was it a good contract?
Let's go to JB in Squirrel Hill. What's up, JB? How you?
Hey, how are you guys?
All right.
All right. First of all, I have a prediction. Los Angeles Clippers are going to make the NBA Finals.
No.
They're going to play the Boston Celtics. Wait
No.
a second. Also, this whole Penguins thing, I trace back to the Ryan Reeves trade. Why did they had won like 7 or 8 in a row, and then they dealt Reeves.
I don't understand
the
it.
whole thing unraveled.
Yeah. That's a good point. First of all, the Clippers aren't going to do it. They came back from 31, and that was great. But they had to shoot 9 for 9 from 3 to do it. They're not going to do that. Golden State will wake up tonight and blow them out. Mark my words. Houston has more of a chance ending up there. But that's, I like what Doc Rivers has done. But, Paul, to the point of Ryan Reeves, it did seem strange because Rutherford went out of his way to get a guy who can go on and not only set an edge, but respond to people who do mess with your top players because the league wasn't calling a lot of stuff. But they gave up Oscar Sundqvist, who's really had a good year, especially in the playoffs for St. Louis, and a #1 pick to get him. And then all of a sudden they change it.
Yeah.
That didn't make sense.
Well, I think part of it is that was one of those trades that Rutherford made for a player that Mike Sullivan didn't want. That's, I think it's that simple.
But they go on, they do things together as a unit, they say.
They say, but again, it was pretty clear that Mike Sullivan did not want Ryan
Or he
Reeves.
didn't play him. His
He
minutes
just, you know
were
what I
down.
mean? It's one of those. It was like when they handed Baalsma. What was the guy they got from?
From who?
From Boston.
Iginla.
Iginla. When they got
Yeah.
him, remember, it was pretty clear that Baalsma didn't want him or didn't know how to use him.
Well, he played him out of
position, and then, it was just never what it should have been. There's just sometimes I think these coaches get in their mind what they want, and when they don't get it, it's like, well, I don't want this guy.
Well, that's an interesting point that Fred had made. All right, we have tweets. Craig says, keep Malkin. Ryan Casper says something I don't want to repeat. Ron Matthews, very telling that Jim Rutherford made a statement about some Penguin players being complacent having already won 2 Stanley Cups. I think his point was the hunger wasn't there. You heard players say this to back up what he said, that the Islanders were hungrier, that the Islanders were more disciplined, that the Islanders had a better system. All of these things undermine what management is trying to do. And I think Rutherford just said what he had to say. We're due for a break. We'll take it, come back with more conversation with Paul Zeise and you right here on the Sports Call.